Welcome, Jet fans. It's already week 8 in the NFL regular season, and the Jets, after the bye week, after a big victory against the Eagles, where the Jets were shorthanded, get a much needed break in the bye and get some actually outstanding injury news this week. Obviously, we know that the Jets were shorthanded in the last game against the Eagles. Well, this week against the Giants, a lot of those players are coming back. Um, both Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed, who missed the last game against the Eagles and left that secondary a little bit vulnerable, although they did stand up to the task against two great receivers and Devontae Smith and AJ Brown. They will be suiting up this week. They both cleared concussion protocols this afternoon, or at least it was reported this afternoon by Robert Saleh in his weekly press conference that the Jets would indeed have Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed available for this weekend's game. So a huge boost right out of the gate. Obviously, this defense can do a lot of really big things when all their corners are suiting up. Can come in with a little bit more pressure. Although the Jets don't have a big blitz package in their arsenal that they utilize. But this does open things up a little bit more. I mean, if you look at that game, there was a lot of you know doubling up on the outsides with the corners and the safeties, trying to kind of help out these inexperienced corners, or in some of these corners case, players that just haven't played the position in quite some time, or at least in a starting capacity. But moving forward, or at least this week against the Giants, we'll be fully expected to have DJ Reed and Sauce Gardner going. So right out of the gate, that's a huge boost for this team. Michael Carter did appear on the injury report. Looks like he's limited for the week, so we'll see how that turns out if he's going to be available. But I mean, obviously, having those two guys on the outside makes a huge difference, especially going against these Giants receivers who, I mean, Jalen Hyatt has shown some upside, shown some improvement, but these guys are no AJ Brown, Devontae Smith from a talent standpoint. Um, but the Jets can be very flexible on the defense side of the ball when they have these two top guys. That's a big reason why they brought these guys in, both in the offseason last year. Robert Saleh's defense, is based on coverage, and allowing his pass rushers to get home is a big thing that his defense kind of needs in these type of games. So I mean, having these guys back is just going to open things up for what for the Jets defensive line. And going into this Giants game, there's a few areas where I kind of looked at as being critical areas where we need to see the Jets get the upper hand in these games and start things off. We'll start with the Jets defensive line versus the Giants offensive line. The Giants offensive line has had their fair share of issues to start the season. The last few games they've played better than they have in the past. It's not a drastic improvement, but it's worlds better than what we saw in that opening game against Dallas, where it looked like there was a guy living in the backfield basically every single play. Um, the Giants' offensive line allows pressure on 13.8% of dropbacks, and that's a huge number. In fact, it's last in the NFL. And the Jets' defensive line, you know, we've grown accustomed to what this defensive line can do. They get pressure. They cause havoc in the backfield. Although they haven't had the large sack numbers that maybe we would have thought going into the season, they are still averaging about 2 sacks a game in the season. So um, you're dealing with strength versus weakness here when you talk about the Jets defense versus the offense of the Giants. And I fully expect that the Jets need to take advantage here and get some pressure. A guy specifically that I'm expecting a big game out of here would be Quinton Williams. The Giants have had issues on that offensive line, and potentially having. I know that there are some injuries on the Giants offensive line with John Michael Schmitz. Um, Evan Neal and Andrew Thomas, both still going through some injury stuff too. So the Giants' offensive line, being a weakness, might still be without some of their top offensive linemen, or a good portion of that starting five. So definitely a situation where the Jets need to take advantage. That's truly where I believe this game can be won or lost. You look I referred to it earlier. Look at that Dallas game, what Dallas was able to do to the Giants. They were able to get pressure almost immediately on every single play that the Giants were playing, and eventually, it just became too much for the Giants. Now the Giants did have Daniel Jones starting at that point in time, and now, I mean, it hasn't been made official, but all signs seem to be pointing that Daniel Jones will be out this week, and Tyrod Taylor will most likely be the starter for this the second week in a row that he'd be starting. So while he's been actually third week in a row that he'll be starting, while you know while the Giants' offense has been a little bit more productive over the last couple of games, Tyrod Taylor's been a journeyman. He does do things the right way. He played with Buffalo and led them, in that season to a playoff berth. So he's a guy that knows how to operate offenses, especially Brian Daboll's offense, being with him back in those days in Buffalo. But the Jets, here's a perfect situation where you got a backup quarterback. The Jets took advantage of this last year on numerous occasions. It's been highly reported that a lot of their victories last year came while teams were out of their starting quarterback. Here's a situation where the Jets come out of the bye, they're well rested, they have, you know, they're getting a lot of their injured players back, and you would expect for them to take advantage of this opportunity. And I do really think that the Jets have the upper hand in this series at this point. Um, it just we're talking about a team that's in the third year of a rebuild. Um, versus a team that's, still kind of gaining their ground. They did get luck the Giants did get lucky with a great coaching hire. I think Brian Daboll is a fantastic coach, and I think that, this season has just been I think last year maybe for this team, they exceeded expectations, and it put big expectations on this season. But I kind of expected the Giants to kind of have like a settling down type of season. I don't think it'd be fair to kind of justify what Brian Dable is capable of. I mean, if the bottom falls out, which I don't think it would, if the bottom does fall out in this team, obviously things could go south for this coaching staff. But I don't see that being the case. I think down the stretch he will kind of hold things together. But against the Jets and this D line, when the Giants' offensive line has had their issues to start the year, I think that's just a tall ask for any coach to really be able to kind of put that together. But again, it comes down to execution. This Jets D line does need to start kind of wreaking that havoc like it was earlier in the earlier part of the season. Moving forward, sticking in the trenches, we'll move over to the Jets side of this thing. So Jets offensive line versus the Wink Martindale blitz packages, and I probably should have started this header too, kind of identifying Zach Wilson in this aspect as well. I mean, obviously the Jets offensive line is going to need to kind of watch out for what Martindale brings. I mean, he's notorious. He comes from that Baltimore style of defense, similar kind of how Rex Ryan used to do things. You'll have 8 guys in the box, and at any point in time, Ole can come. A few can back off, or come with limited pressure. You could drop Kayvon Thibodeau, which is something that they've done a lot in the games that I've seen from the Giants. It's a lot of situations where Thibodeau's not applying pressure, but he's dropping back in coverage. Not sure if that's what they intended when they originally drafted him, um, fifth overall in last year's draft. But that's something that they've kind of been doing, and that's something that this defense does, at least from what we've all kind of grown accustomed to from seeing Wink in Baltimore and in his now second year with the Giants. He's going to come with a lot of different packages, a lot of speed rushes, and you know trust that his pressure is going to get through the offensive line. With the Jets offensive line, obviously, there's been some injuries over the last couple of weeks. Elijah Vera Tucker has been ruled out for the season with the Achilles injury, although, we all know the Achilles situation. Aaron Rodgers trying to come back from an Achilles, but obviously for Aaron Rodgers to come back, that would be a miracle in its own right. But in addition to that, happened early in the season. Vera Tucker happening mid-season does obviously rule him out for the rest of the way. And then obviously as well, Titman getting injured in that Eagles game in the early part of the second quarter. um, it sounded like early in the season, early in the week. I mean, Robert Saleh was potentially. gearing up for Tippmann to start. But just like we've kind of known with Robert Saleh, don't really trust his injury reports until things start becoming official. And obviously, it's bad enough to where it's not even a game time decision. He's ruling him out. And he did rule him out earlier in that same press conference. So Tippmann will be out for this week's game. So we're probably going to see a similar offensive line that we saw, or probably the same offensive line that we saw against the Eagles after Tippmann got out, which went left to right, went Becton, Tomlinson, McGovern, and then Wes Schweitzer took the right guard spot from Tippmann, and then Max Mitchell, who started the game, was playing right tackle. Dwayne Brown is back at practice, but he has been ruled out for this game. They have not activated him from opening his practice schedule, so he's not playing. But that's something that you can look at. Max Mitchell has been playing pretty serviceable, back to like kind of what we saw from him in his rookie year at the right spot, at the right tackle spot. Far cry from what we were seeing in the preseason. The preseason looked terrible. It looked like he forgot how to play. But then again, he is a second year player. He was drafted late in the draft the year prior, so weren't really expecting for this guy to be a starting caliber player. And he kind of burst on the scene last year because of injuries and played pretty well until he himself got injured. And then, obviously, like I said, in the preseason, did not look great, especially in that Cleveland game to open up the open up the preseason slate. But like I said, since he's been in the offensive line, he's handled the right side pretty serviceable. Has been perfect. By no means is that the case, but I think he's holding up enough, and the Jets offense is kind of getting the ball out of Zach's hands pretty quickly. And that's going to be a major item here as we get into this game. Is the Jets are going to have to get the ball out of Zach Wilson's hands as quickly and as frequently as possible. And I really do expect that the Jets are going to come in with the brace ball package to try and get him the ball in space, try and get him to run the football, and that because that's really the best way to stop these blitz packages. If you throw those screen pass in the direction of the blitz, sometimes you can get lucky and have a key block, and it could spring him. And we all know once Brees has the ball in his hands and there's open space in front of him, the only thing stopping him is the whistle at the end of the play as he crosses the goal line. So big key here. This is a game purely in the trenches. Outside the skill spots, I mean, with the Jets wide receivers going up against the Giants DBs and the Giants receivers going up against the Jets DBs, I don't really see kind of an area where the Jets can or the Giants can really excel. Obviously, the Jets would have a major uptick in um, from a talent standpoint when they're going up against the Giants wide receivers. But the Jets wide receivers really have not shown the ability to separate on third downs outside of Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson's going to have his hands full going up against this week. I mean, Wink kind of comes from a similar mold where he's going to try and stop the other team's best receiver on any given play. So the Jets are going to have a little bit of difficulties on third downs trying to get the ball to Garrett Wilson. Love to see a situation where the Jets can kind of incorporate some of that early down targets for Garrett Wilson. Once it gets third down, everyone knows, especially if third and long, everyone knows the one guy you got to cover is Garrett Wilson for the Jets. So, in a lot of these situations, you've seen that Zach Wilson has to find Alan Lazard or one of his tight ends or a dump off to a running back to try and get those critical downs to convert. And with that being said, I mean, I think we're all very aware of the last and probably the most major issue going into this game is going to be that red zone efficiency of the Jets going against the Giants in the red zone. And you know, this is an area where both these teams have had their struggles in the red zone from an offensive standpoint. Um, the Giants are ranked last. Sorry, Giants are ranked 31st in the league. Jets are ranked last. So we're basically neck and neck here on overall red zone efficiency from an offensive standpoint. Where the Jets can definitely take a step in the right direction on this is their red zone defense is ranked fourth in the NFL. They're successful in holding offenses to touchdowns on only 36% of red zone appearances, whereas the Giants are only scoring on 33% of their red zone appearances. So, or scoring touchdowns, that is. When they're using those ratios, they're referring to touchdowns as being a success, field goals and turnovers obviously constituting as a failure. Although you do want to at least get field goals in those type of situations. So definitely an area where the Jets need to kind of take advantage here is, you know, capitalize on the red zone on offense and the defense to continue its stride and continue kind of building off of what they have in the first few weeks this season, holding teams out of the end zone when they do get into the red zone. And then, I mean, I guess to kind of go into this a little bit further, you know, when you're talking about red zone efficiency, the Jets have done a good job of getting to the red zone. It's just been an issue once they get in there. It's been well documented. We've talked about it for quite some time, whether it's a penalty here or, a sack or, you know, just just miscommunications. There's been a lot of different reasons why the Jets have had their difficulties scoring in the red zone. Um, and I think that problem kind of retriculates itself when you're talking about third down efficiency. The Jets are also last on offense in third down efficiency. With only a 25% conversion rate. That's just not going to win you games in this league. A lot. The average falls like somewhere in the mid to high 30s. I mean that's the average. I mean that's basically converting on a third or more of your of your third down opportunities. The Jets are converting one out of every four with that 25% rate. And where the Giants can probably take a little bit of a step here to kind of help their cause. Their third down efficiency on offense is about 38%, which ranks around 21st in the league. That's a good number considering what the Jets defense is doing on third downs. This is an area where I think the Jets have had like a lot of struggles. I mean, I would say the defense is doing a fantastic job in many different areas, but where they seem to be failing a little bit, at least from, and we saw in the Eagles game on their first touchdown drive, the Eagles went down, converted on I want to say it was three or four third down opportunities, and the Jets obviously couldn't stop them on that fourth down touchdown run um, by Jalen Hurts. Although there was some controversy behind that, never really saw an angle where I thought it could be confirmed that he did cross the line without his knee hitting the ground, but obviously that's in the past. But the Jets have been, from a defense standpoint, allowing teams to basically convert on almost 47% of their third down opportunities. That's a recipe for disaster. It's actually ranked 30th in the league for as great as this defense is. You would expect for that area to be cleaned up. And I think what we've seen from the Jets is that number kind of um, I feel like that number kind of goes down in the second half and is high up in the first half, and it kind of goes with their slow starts and their you know the issues that they've been having in the first half of games. They're like a different defense overall when you look at what they do in the first half versus what they do in the second half. But that's an area like I mean, if the Jets can really kind of focus on one thing on defense is that opening series of plays. And they talked about this a little bit with Ulbrich in his weekly press conference a couple days ago, and a lot of the issues with or at least what he's seen as far as why they get better as the game goes on, is he's allowing for them to kind of digest and understand what's happening in different formations and different sets. And as the game progresses, the knowledge of this defense kind of allows them to take that next step. My caveat to that would be, if you're watching film, I mean, obviously game plan to game plan, everything is different week to week. But generally speaking, you should have an idea of what an offense is trying to do to you, just based on film from prior games. Just that's probably the biggest thing, like the biggest mind-boggling thing to me, is this defense is so great, but they're struggling in the first halves of these games, and all of a sudden the second half, just like a light flicks, and they go from you know struggling and giving up a lot of yards in the first half to all of a sudden just like flipping a switch and just locking teams down. I mean, you look at the Eagles game. They scored all their points in the first 20 minutes of the game, didn't do anything in the last 40 minutes of the game from an offensive standpoint. Just a perfect situation here. I mean, it looked like that game was going to get out of hand and get out of hand pretty quickly. But the Jets, with their turnover happy defense, another game where they were able to take the ball away and get the victory. And that's really like, I mean, if you look at what this team is like, as far as like what does it take to get wins, it's going to take the pressure, it's going to take the turnovers. This offense to this point hasn't really proven that they can operate efficiently enough to keep them in games. Zach has not been turning the ball over. The concern I have with him going up against a defense like Wink Martindale's is as the pressure comes, we haven't seen Zach really play under pressure as bad as he has in some seasons, like in last season. We haven't seen the pressure coming home the way it has in the past. With Wink Martindale, that's going to be a major emphasis, I would assume. He's going to want to get pressure on Zach and force him to make a mistake. And is Zach going to make that mistake, or is he going to move forward in a direction and try and help his team win games? It's going to be a critical stretch for Zach. These next these next 5 games. I mean, I've spoken about it, or next 6 games really. I've spoken about it. This is the area, the stretch of the season where the Jets can really take that next step. And in their overall in this season, if they want to make a playoff push, this next 6 games, they've got to go 4-2 or 5-1. I know it's 5-1's a major step, and obviously, with some of the some of the issues that we have on this team, that might be a far reach. But Giants is definitely winnable. I think on paper, the Jets are a much better team. I know the Giants are labeled as the home team, but there's going to be a lot of Jet fans at this game. I don't think it's going to be a fully home experience for the Giants as maybe some other games would be. But this is a completely winnable game. Next week, we play the Chargers, I believe, on Monday Night Football. That's a game that the Jets just have to kind of look at what the Chargers have done over the course of the season. It's just basically the same old story with them. Chargers are in all these games, but late in the game, they just don't make enough plays. And eventually, the loss comes to their record. They are not, the great team that everyone really expected of them to be coming into the season and coming into last season. Um, they have a major deficiency at the head coach spot. I don't believe that Brandon Staley survives even the end of the season. Really, I mean, this is a situation. I'm not sure when the Chargers bye week or if they even had it at this point. But that's the type of situation where I could definitely see if the losses keep piling up that he could be potentially one of the first coaches to get fired. Honestly, I'm kind of surprised how he didn't get fired after some of these offenses in the first the first couple of seasons he's been a head coach there. In his first season, he got cute in the final game of the season against the Raiders and just called timeouts when obviously it was a situation where they were in overtime. If both teams tied, both teams got in. So really no team had a reason to kind of push for a victory. In fact, if either team won, the other team would miss the playoffs, and I believe it was the Steelers that would end up being the 7th seed or 6th seed, whatever it end up being. Probably 7th seed, if those 2 teams had the upper hand on them. So he was in a situation, Raiders were running the football, wind out the clock with not much time left, and this guy's calling timeouts, and um, the Raiders coach was like, "Screw it. He wants to call timeouts. Let me run this football. Let me get us a field goal range, and let me hit a game-winning field goal," which they ended up doing. They missed the playoffs last year. 2 years ago. Last year, they make the playoffs. They are up huge on Jacksonville, and this guy's a defensive-minded coach, and completely, you know, and the bottom falls out. Trevor Lawrence has an outstanding second half, and the rest is history. He's out of the playoffs after 1 week there, and then you get to this season, and the only thing that's changed for him is that he's grown a beard, and as far as like a head coaching standpoint, it just doesn't seem like he's it. Um, could he be a great defensive coordinator? If that's his only responsibility. Possibly he was successful with the Rams as a defense coordinator, but that was an all world. It was a stacked defense that had players all over the place. Jalen Ramsey, Aaron Donald, Super Bowl caliber defense that he was able to, you know, make a top tier unit. That's what got him his head coaching opportunity. But from what we've seen from him with the Los Angeles Chargers, has just been absolutely terrible. So again, I kind of stick by that. I think he's going to be the first head coach fired this season. And again, it depends on when their bye week is. That would be a real target date for me as far as when the Chargers might be willing to make that switch. Um, but that's all I have pretty much here on this. Oh yeah, and going further, I kind of stopped where I was going, but you got the Giants game this week, winnable. Chargers game, winnable. Raiders game in Vegas, winnable game. I think that's you know definitely an area where depending on how the obviously the first two games go, the Jets can really kind of get into that Buffalo, Miami back to back games at 6-3, potentially with an opportunity to challenge for first place in the division. They'll be at Buffalo and then home against Miami on Black Friday. Um, five five games for now, and then Atlanta. So really, when you look at those six games, you know the tough ones: Buffalo, Miami. Buffalo is not playing like an all-world team like they were last year to start the year last year. Some of their deficiencies and some of their issues have kind of carried over into this season. Jets beat them in the opening game of the season without Aaron Rodgers for all but four plays. They were able to get the victory over the Bills in that game, and then it's just been like since the Bills have gone to London, they just haven't been great. Even yesterday's game against Tampa Bay, I mean, they get that late touchdown to Tampa Bay, had the opportunity in a 4 minute type of offense to get to basically wind the game out. Couldn't get a first down, end up punting it, and for no reason, with 30 seconds left in the game, with Mayfield at the quarterback spot, would you ever expect that Tampa Bay would have an opportunity to get into a Hail Mary type of situation? He throws a Hail Mary, and the ball basically falls right in front of Chris Godwin, who didn't have enough time to turn around and really locate the ball to where he can make a catch. Had it been in the air for an extra second, maybe he would have had the opportunity to kind of adjust and get under it. But that's the game where the Bills had a big lead at home, chance to kind of get things straightened out, and almost blew it. Now they did end up winning the game, so obviously wins aren't easy in this league, so you take them however they come. But that's a game where at Buffalo, I mean they're not invincible. We've beaten them already. We seem to be a thorn in the side of Josh Allen last season. With Mike White playing with basically like broken ribs, come back in the second half. Almost let us in a comeback in that game. So it's definitely possible. I mean, with all these games, it just comes down to which Zach Wilson do we see? Do we see the game manager, or do we see the one that gets in his own head? Um, and we need to see a lot more of the game manager Zach Wilson and potentially the playmaking Zach Wilson at some point would be absolutely magnificent. But obviously, with everything kind of on his plate from last year, everything he went through, this coaching staff has taken it very conservative with him, and rightfully so. But at some point in the season, the Jets are going to have to win games behind him, and you know, not behind the defense every single time. But that's all I have here. Big game coming up. Obviously, Jets need to take advantage of a Giants team that has opened the season struggling, and has a backup quarterback going, and potentially injuries riddled throughout the offensive line. And I do believe the Jets come out with a victory in this game. I do think it's an area where the Jets can really dominate and win the Snoopy Bowl in the regular season for what would be I think the third time consecutively. So obviously, big week here. Let's get this next stretch of the season off to a good start post bye week. These next six games. critical for the season. I think we could really go back and look at this 6-week stretch at the end of the year, and if we're in the playoffs, we'll understand why. Looking at the 6-game stretch, if we're out, obviously that would probably mean that we didn't things didn't go our way in this 6-game stretch. So if you haven't already, appreciate if you'd like and subscribe to my channel. And as always, let's go Jets.